Long before Babylon, long before Assyria, and way before the empires you know from the classical world, there was Akkad. Today, we're diving into the incredible, dramatic story of the world's very first empire, a civilization forged by a man of legend that reached for the heavens before, well, completely vanishing from history.
So how did this unprecedented power get built? Who were these legendary rulers? And how did it all just come crashing down? This isn't just a story about ancient history, you know? It's really the origin story of an idea, the idea of empire, that would go on to shape humanity forever. Okay, so to really get why Akkad was such a revolution, we have to first paint a picture of the world it was born into. We're in Mesopotamia, yeah, the cradle of civilization, but it was anything but peaceful. I want you to just imagine dozens of independent cities, places like Uruk, and Kish. Now, these guys were brilliant. They were masters of writing, irrigation, architecture, but they were also constantly at each other's throats. They fought endlessly over everything: water rights, strips of farmland, just plain old prestige. It was this amazing but fundamentally broken world, just waiting for a single, ruthless force to come in and change the game. And into this chaotic world steps a man who was practically myth, a guy who wouldn't just conquer a few cities, but would create an entirely new way of holding power. His name was Sargon of Akkad. I mean, listen to this origin story. It sounds a lot like other epic heroes, right? A bit like Moses. The legend goes he was born in secret, put in a basket, and cast adrift on the river, only to be found by a humble gardener. Now, whether that's literal truth or just great PR, the message is crystal clear. Sargon was an outsider. He wasn't one of the old royal families. He was something new, and he was destined for greatness. Historians actually have a term for this: homo novus, a new man. Sargon perfectly fits the bill. He overthrew the king he was working for in the city of Kish and then just kept going, with his sights set on uniting the entire land. He was a total disruptor. He even founded his own brand new capital city, Akkad, basically to signal that the old ways were over.
So how did he actually hold it all together? It wasn't just about winning battles. He was an innovator. He created what was likely the world's first professional standing army, about 5,400 soldiers who were loyal only to him, not to some city. He installed his own trusted people as governors. He standardized weights and measures to make trade easier across his new empire. And he made his own language, Akkadian, the official language of government. This was literally the blueprint for every empire that came after.
And Sargon's genius wasn't just military or political. In a really clever move to bring the culturally distinct Sumerian South on board, he appointed his own daughter, Enheduanna, as the high priestess in the important city of She wrote these beautiful, powerful hymns, and in doing so, she became the very first author in all of human history whose name we actually know. How amazing is that? The empire Sargon built was powerful, for sure, but it was also really unstable. After he died, his sons had to deal with constant rebellions. It wasn't until his grandson took the throne that the Akkadian Empire reached its absolute and frankly most audacious peak. So let's just trace the line really quick. Sargon's sons, Rimush and Manishdusu, basically spent their entire reigns just brutally putting down revolts. They held the empire together, but just barely. And then came Narm-Sin. He didn't just crush the rebellions, he expanded the empire's borders farther than anyone thought possible. And this is where Narm-Sin just completely flipped the script on what it meant to be a king. See, a traditional Sumerian ruler was supposed to be a humble servant of his city's main god. Narm-Sin? Yeah, he saw things a little differently. He started calling himself the king of the four corners of the world, and then, in a move that must have been absolutely shocking, he declared himself a living god. And we don't just have to take ancient texts at their word. We have the proof carved right into stone. This is his famous victory stele. You see him here, bigger than everyone else, marching up a mountain towards the heavens. But look closer. Look at his helmet. He's wearing the horned helmet. That was a symbol that, up until him, was only ever worn by gods in Mesopotamian art. The message couldn't be clearer. He wasn't just serving the gods, he was one of them. So you've got a self-proclaimed god king, an empire at its peak. What could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turns out, a lot. The collapse of Akkad was just as sudden and just as dramatic as its rise. First off, the empire was basically rotting from the inside. Those conquered Sumerian cities, they never, ever stopped resisting.
From day one, Akkad was dealing with constant, widespread rebellions. Naram-Sin was great at crushing them, but that resentment was always there, just simmering below the surface. The empire was just too big, too new, too diverse to control forever.
So, while the empire was being weakened from within, a new threat was showing up on the outside. From the Zagros Mountains came these people the Sumerians called the Gutians. And man, the ancient texts did not like them, describing them as serpents of the mountains, a barbarian horde that didn't respect the gods or laws. They started raiding Akkadian lands, taking advantage of all the chaos.
So you've got internal rebellion, an external invasion, and then the empire got hit by a force no army on Earth could defeat: climate change. Right around 2200 BCE, scientific evidence points to a sudden, catastrophic mega drought that just slammed the entire region. The rivers shrank, the rain stopped, and the crops failed.
The famine that followed was just devastating. Later Mesopotamian storytellers tried to explain it by creating a myth, the Curse of Akkad. The story claimed the gods destroyed the empire because Naram-Sin had angered them with his arrogance. But really, this myth was almost certainly a reflection of a terrifying reality. Their whole world, an empire built on agriculture, was being starved into oblivion. So, by about 2154 BCE, it was all over. The Akkadian Empire had collapsed. The Gutians moved in, and the old Sumerian cities started to reassert their independence. But the story doesn't actually end there. Not really. Here's the crazy thing. The physical city of Akkad, the capital, it was abandoned, and its location became one of history's great mysteries. To this day, archaeologists are still not 100% sure where it is. So the empire was gone. But the idea of Akkad, the idea of a universal empire, that was here to stay. Think about it. Sargon and Naram-Sin had created the world's first imperial blueprint. This idea of putting a ton of different peoples under one single centralized authority. The use of a professional army that's loyal to the ruler, having a single official language to run the whole show, and of course that powerful ideology of an absolute, maybe even divine king. And this model was absolutely not forgotten. Pretty much every major empire that came after in that part of the world, the Babylonians, the terrifying Assyrians, even the massive Persian Empire, they all built upon the foundations that Akkad had laid. They all copied, adapted, and perfected the imperial tools that Sargon first invented. So while the city of Akkad is still buried somewhere under the sands of Iraq, its legacy is all around us. It introduced the world to the very idea of empire, an idea of centralized power, cultural influence, and military might that has been repeated again and again and again throughout all of human history, right up to our own time. Which kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. The city of Akkad is lost, but is its blueprint for empire still with us?
History isn't dust, it's a journey through time. Here on History LM, we tell it simply and fast. If you love discovering the past in just a few minutes, hit like and follow History LM. Your next journey through time is waiting.